The wedding hall was drowning in orchids and silence. Hundreds of eyes stared at the empty altar. Maya Caldwell stood in the center, stiff in a pearl-beaded gown that suddenly felt like glass against her skin. The groom's chair was empty. So was the space beside her. The whispers had started 20 minutes ago. They slithered between guests like smoke, biting at the back of her neck. Is this a joke? Maybe he's late. He couldn't just not show up, but he had. Grayson Ashford, heir to the Ashford name, the man who had promised her forever, had vanished. 3 days ago, no calls, no messages, no body, only silence. And now humiliation. The kind that didn't sting immediately but burned later, like frostbite thawing. Maya's mother stood near the first row, dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, more concerned with reputation than ruin. Her father stared blankly ahead, jaw locked, refusing to meet her gaze. And Maya, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood there as if the grief might forget to notice her. Then, a sound, not the crowd, not footsteps. Something heavier. The door at the end of the aisle creaked open. A man stepped in. Dark suit, dark hair, same storm gray eyes, but not Grayson. His brother, Leo Ashford, the quieter one. The one who never smiled in pictures. The one who rarely spoke. The one who stood in corners and watched everything. He walked up the aisle with steady steps, stopping in front of her. She met his eyes, searching for answers, for apologies, for anything. He didn't flinch. "I'll marry you," he said simply. The words struck the crowd like lightning. Someone gasped. A glass shattered somewhere. But Leo didn't blink. "I'll stand in," he continued, voice low, controlled. "If you want, you don't have to walk out of here alone." Maya stared at him, her body frozen, her soul too tired to tremble. Was this pity? Was this some desperate attempt to save face? Why him? And then, she saw something in his eyes. Not love, not yet. But something stronger than sympathy. Stillness. The kind of stillness you only find in people who choose to stay when everyone else leaves. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "Okay." The priest looked horrified. The guests stunned. The cameras slowly lowered. But Leo simply nodded. And in the hush of a wedding meant for someone else, Maya Caldwell married a man who had never once kissed her. A man who wasn't supposed to be hers. A man who promised nothing, but didn't walk away. The ride home was wordless. The engine hummed softly beneath them. The passing world outside the window was blurred with dusk and the leftovers of a storm that never fully arrived. Maya sat in the passenger seat of the Ashford family car, still in her wedding gown, her bouquet abandoned somewhere behind her. Her hands rested in her lap like they didn't belong to her anymore. Beside her, Leo drove, focused, calm, not glancing at her, not speaking, but present, and somehow that mattered more than anything else. The Ashford estate sat at the edge of the city, just past the iron gates that once made her feel welcome. Tonight they looked like they were closing behind her. The staff didn't ask questions when they arrived. The housekeeper opened the front door. The butler lowered his eyes. The flowers Grayson had picked out, red peonies, still lined the halls. The champagne was still chilling. And on the marble fireplace mantel, a picture of Maya and Grayson, smiling framed in gold. Maya stopped, stared at it, and turned it face down without a word. Leo didn't stop her. He simply said, "Let me get you out of that dress." She flinched. He caught it. "Not like that," he added gently. "I meant it looks heavy. Let me help." He didn't touch her. He disappeared into the guest bedroom, the one that would now be hers, and returned with one of his sister's robes, left behind during a visit. He handed it to her like it was fragile. Maya took it in silence, brushing past him into the bathroom. When the door closed, she sank to the floor. Not to cry, just to breathe. There was no ceremony. No music, no first dance, no kiss, only a quiet man waiting in the hallway and a gown she peeled off like old skin. That night, she didn't sleep in the bridal suite. She didn't even ask what Leo planned to do. They passed each other in the hallway once. She barefoot, hair still damp from a too long shower. He nodded. She nodded back. That was enough. In the morning Leo made tea. Not coffee tea. He poured her a cup before she even walked in. "Do you take anything?" he asked, without looking up. "Lemon," she said after a moment. He passed her the slice without a word. They sat across from each other at the massive kitchen table, so much space between them, it felt like a small country. After a long stretch of silence, Maya finally spoke. "Why did you do it?" Leo looked up from his cup. "Because you needed someone to." "That's not a reason people marry." "I'm not most people." She studied him. "You don't even like me." His gaze didn't waver. "That's not true." She frowned. "We've barely spoken." He nodded once. "And still, I see you." That shut her up, because it wasn't flirtation, it wasn't pity, it wasn't even kindness, it was truth, simple, clear, unpolished, and it hit her harder than anything Grayson had ever said with all his smooth words. Later that day the doorbell rang. A gift basket from one of Grayson's clients. A wedding congratulations. Leo took it silently and placed it in the hallway, far from sight. Maya stood by the window, arms crossed. "He'll come back, you know," she said softly. Leo paused. "Maybe." She turned to face him. "And when he does." Leo met her eyes. "Then you'll know if he ever really meant to stay." Maya didn't respond, didn't need to, because in that moment, she knew something she hadn't let herself believe. Grayson had always been halfway gone. But Leo was fully here. The storm rolled in late, curling around the Ashford estate like a secret too heavy to keep. Wind rattled the windows. Thunder grumbled deep in the clouds. Rain painted silver streaks against the glass. Maya stood at the library window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the world fall apart outside, mirroring something she still hadn't named inside. Leo was somewhere in the house, silent as always. The man didn't speak unless it mattered, didn't force presence, didn't fill silence with noise. He simply existed with the patience of a man who knew what it meant to be overlooked and still chose to remain. Tonight, that silence felt heavier. She needed distraction. She wandered from one room to another until she found herself in the quietest corner of the house, the old study. Not Grayson's, Leo's. It was different from his brother's space. No whiskey decanters, no leather armchairs, built for theatrics, just simple wood, shelves, papers, a desk scarred with use. A small brass lamp still glowed on the side, out of habit, or maybe hunger for something real. Maya moved closer. That's when she saw the journal. It wasn't labeled, but tucked inside the pages was something unmistakable. A manuscript. Her fingers hesitated. It wasn't hers, but she opened it anyway. The first line stopped her breath. "I've always been the shadow, but maybe the shadow is just a place the light hasn't reached yet." It wasn't poetry. It wasn't polished. It was truth, raw, quiet, bleeding onto the page. Page after page, she read. A story of a man, never named, watching someone fall in love with his brother. A woman with laughter like light, who never turned his way. A man who never tried to steal her. Never envied her love. He just wrote about her, because that was the only way to hold her without breaking her. Maya didn't know how long she sat there, but by the time she looked up, the storm outside had quieted, and Leo stood in the doorway, watching her. She didn't jump, didn't flinch, just looked at him with something wide and shaking in her chest. "You wrote this," she said. Leo nodded once, slowly. Maya stood, the manuscript still in her hands. "It's about you," he said simply. Her fingers curled tighter around the pages. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because you were never supposed to read it," he replied. "It was how I let you go without ruining what you had with him." Maya's throat closed. "But I didn't have him." Leo looked away. "I know." She stepped forward. "Just once. I didn't know you saw me," she whispered. He met her gaze then, all the weight and ache he'd carried finally visible. "I always did," he said. "I just didn't think you'd want to be seen by me." A silence passed, not cold, not awkward, but trembling, fragile. Maya looked down at the manuscript, and for the first time since she married Leo Ashford, she didn't feel like a stranger in her own story. End of chapter 3. Approx. 1350 cinematic words. Would you like me to continue immediately with Chapter 4? Is the garden they build together, where Maya and Leo begin tending the neglected garden together, and what grows between them becomes deeper than words. Say continue Chapter 4. And I'll write it right away. You said yes, ChatGPT said. Chapter 4. The garden they build together. The garden had been abandoned for over a year. Shrubs had swallowed the paths. The roses were skeletal. The fountain in the center stood cracked dry, and surrounded by weeds like brittle regret. It was Grayson's project once, something grand, aesthetic, meant to impress. But when he left, it was Leo who quietly asked the groundskeeper not to tear it down. And now it was Maya who stood in the middle of it, boots sinking slightly into the softened earth, staring at the wreckage of something that could have been beautiful. "What are you doing out here?" Leo asked, appearing behind her. She didn't turn around, trying to find something worth saving. He was silent for a moment, then "Start with the fountain. It used to work. I don't know how to fix fountains." Leo shrugged, stepping beside her. "Neither do I." She glanced at him. "Then what are you offering?" He looked around the forgotten garden, then met her eyes. 2 hands. And time. They started with gloves and shears and hours of silence. Leo pulled weeds with methodical patience. Maya trimmed hedges, reclaiming space one vine at a time. They didn't talk much at first, but when they did, it was small things. "I hated peonies," she confessed one afternoon, tossing a dead bloom aside. Leo raised an eyebrow. "They were everywhere at the wedding." "I know." He didn't ask more, didn't press, he just handed her a fresh pair of clippers. By the 3rd day, they found a buried stone bench under the ivy. Maya sat on it while Leo scrubbed moss from the fountain basin. "Why did you really keep the garden?" she asked suddenly. Leo didn't look up. "I didn't want it destroyed just because he forgot it." She studied him for a beat. "You do that a lot." "Do what?" "Hold things others let go of." Leo paused, then said quietly, "Maybe I'm just waiting for something to grow." They planted things after that. She chose lavender. He added jasmine. He built a trellis from reclaimed wood. She painted it a deep blue, like the dusk they watched from the steps. And somewhere in the stillness of that place, something else began to bloom. It wasn't loud, wasn't sudden. It was the quietest kind of intimacy. The kind built in shared silences, lingering glances, muddy hands brushing by accident, and neither of them pulling away. One evening, they sat on the bench as the last light dipped below the hedges. Maya leaned back, dirt under her nails, hair pinned up haphazardly. "You don't say much," she murmured. "I say what matters." She looked at him. "So say something that matters now." Leo turned toward her, eyes darker than the sky above. "You smile when you talk about flowers," he said softly. "And I've waited a long time to see you smile again." Maya felt her heart stutter. She wanted to reply, wanted to say something equally delicate, equally kind, but all she could do was reach forward and tuck a piece of his hair behind his ear, her fingers trembling with something she didn't yet understand. And Leo, he let her. Didn't move, didn't breathe, just stayed, like he always did. The garden was nearly finished. Lavender curled along the new stone path. The jasmine had begun to climb the trellis. Even the once dry fountain now whispered softly with water again. Leo had fixed it, quietly one afternoon, refusing credit. It felt like something sacred now. Not a space that Grayson built, but a space Leo and Maya had reclaimed. Together. And that made what happened next feel like a theft. It was a Sunday. Maya stood in the greenhouse, humming under her breath as she sketched new arrangements for the flower beds. Leo was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables with an ease that still surprised her. Then the sound of tires on gravel. Slow. Deliberate. Wrong. Maya turned toward the window. Just as a sleek silver car rolled to a stop in front of the estate, the door opened. A man stepped out, tall, confident, too sure of himself. Even now. Grayson. The man who left her at the altar. Unannounced, unchanged. And Maya's heart dropped like stone into deep water. Leo reached her side before she could move. He looked out the window, saw his brother, and didn't say a word. Maya didn't either. There was nothing to say. Only the sound of the past knocking on a door it had no right to open. Grayson entered like he had been gone a day, not a year. The foyer still remembered him. But Leo didn't move, and Maya stood like stone. "Hello, darling," Grayson said with a casual smile. No apology. No explanation. Just charm. As if charm could fill the space where love had rotted. "You're not supposed to be here," Maya said, her voice quieter than she expected, but steadier. Grayson tilted his head. "I'm still on the deed," he said. "And I figured enough times passed." He looked at her, then at Leo. "You married him?" No anger. Just amusement, like it was a joke he hadn't been let in on. Leo stepped forward, calm but cold. "You walked out. I had my reasons. You didn't call." Grayson gave a long sigh, like this was all exhausting. "I panicked," he said. "It wasn't about you, Maya. It was always about you." Leo said flatly. Maya looked at Leo, surprised. It was the first time his voice had cut like that. Grayson frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Leo said slowly, "that the only time you come back is when you're worried someone else took what you thought would wait for you." Grayson's smile wavered. "Is that what this is about?" he said, gesturing vaguely toward the two of them. Did little brother finally get tired of being the spare? Leo didn't move. Maya stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This isn't about who won." Grayson turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Then what is it?" She held his gaze. "It's about who stayed." Silence. Real silence. The kind that fills every crack and doesn't leave room for denial. Grayson left that night. Not forever. Not angrily. But with something unreadable in his expression, like the first pieces of a mirror cracking. Maya didn't watch him go. Leo didn't speak, but when the front door clicked shut, she turned to the man still standing beside her, and for the first time since they said vows they never planned, she reached for his hand, and he didn't hesitate. The past has a way of peeling back its layers, when you're finally brave enough to ask the questions you once ran from. Maya didn't go searching for answers at first, not because she didn't want them, but because she thought they might not matter anymore. But after Grayson's visit, something inside her shifted. It wasn't longing. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. And a quiet growing anger. Because if she was going to give her heart to Leo fully freely, she needed to lay the past to rest, not mourn it. Not hide it, not wear it like armor. She needed the truth. She found it in the last place she expected: a journal. Not hers, not Leo's, Grayson's, abandoned in the desk drawer of what used to be his study. Left behind like everything else he didn't want to carry. Maya opened it slowly, uncertain if she had the right, but after what he'd done, she figured he didn't deserve privacy without honesty. The entries were scattered, unfinished sentences, half thoughts, but what struck her most were the ones dated 2 weeks before the wedding. "I don't want to be married. I want to be seen. And she looks at me like I'm someone I'm pretending to be." Leo knows. I think he always knew. He never says it, but he watches me with that quiet judgment that makes me want to leave more than stay. She doesn't love him, but she'd be safer with him. That's the worst part. He'd never leave her. Maya read that line 3 times, then closed the book slowly, her breath trembling in her chest. That evening, she found Leo in the garden. He was kneeling beside the lavender beds, dirt staining his palms, the last light of day sliding across his shoulders like a painting. She stood there for a long moment, watching. Not just what he did, but who he was. The man who never left. The man who had watched her love his brother, and never said a word. The man who had offered her a hand, when all she had left was her name. And now she knew why. "Leo." He looked up, his expression unreadable, but his eyes steady. She knelt beside him in the dirt, ignoring the sting of gravel beneath her knees. "I read it," she said softly. He didn't ask what. Didn't flinch. He just said, "Okay." Maya placed a hand on his. "I need to know something." Leo met her eyes. "Did you love me back then?" A pause. Then no. Maya's heart stuttered, but he wasn't finished. "I saw you back then," he said gently. "But I didn't know what it meant, not until you stood alone in that wedding hall. And I realized I didn't want you to walk out with nothing." Her throat tightened. "And now?" He looked down at their hands, now stained. now intertwined. I love the woman you became when no one was watching. He whispered. I love the way you fight for things that matter. And I love that you still don't see how much of my world you've filled just by staying. Maya felt the tears before she could stop them. But they weren't painful this time. They were soft, healing, real. She leaned forward slowly, pressing her forehead to his. I thought I loved your brother, she said. Leo didn't move, but what I loved was the way he made the world louder. And what I needed was someone who made the world quieter. He smiled small and steady. I'll always be quiet. She kissed him. Not urgently. Not for show. But like a vow. Because for the first time, she was choosing not out of fear, not out of abandonment, but out of clarity. Out of truth. Out of something she once thought she'd never feel again. Hope. It happened on a Tuesday. The sky had that dusky tint that comes just before rain. And the wind pressed gently through the open windows, lifting the curtains like slow-moving breath. Leah was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping rosemary with quiet focus. Maya sat at the table, watching him. Not like she was waiting for him to speak, but like she didn't want to miss the way he looked when he didn't know she was looking. That's how it had been between them lately. Not words, not declarations, but steady presence, each moment deeper than the last. She sipped her tea and said, You always cook when your hands are restless. Leo didn't look up. Better than pacing. She smiled. I like it. Makes the house feel warm. He glanced at her then, something flickering behind his eyes. You should always live in warmth, he said softly. Maya's throat tightened. She stood and moved to the counter, standing just beside him. Close enough to feel the heat of him, to hear the sound of his breath when he paused in the middle of a slice. She placed her hand gently over his, still holding the knife, his fingers stilled. She looked up at him. You've never asked me for anything. I didn't want to make you feel like you owed me. I don't, she whispered, but I want to give you something anyway. Leo's eyes darkened. Maya, she reached up, brushing a curl from his forehead. I want this, I want you. She didn't wait for him to answer, because she could already see it in his face. The hunger he never voiced, the ache he buried under silence. So she kissed him, and this time, he kissed her back. It wasn't soft. It wasn't trembling or hesitant. It was years of held breath. Months of stolen glances. Weeks of sleeping in rooms next to each other, but never crossing that invisible line. He pressed her back against the edge of the counter, one hand buried in her hair, the other at her waist. Firm but reverent, like he was afraid he'd wake up and she'd be gone again. Maya gasped into his mouth, fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt. He kissed her like he meant to memorize her, like this wasn't a moment, it was a decision. When they finally pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his chest, breathless. Leo rested his chin gently on her head. No one spoke for a long time, until Maya whispered, I've never felt safer in a storm. Leo's grip on her tightened just lightly, and he whispered back, I've only ever wanted to be someone you could lean into, not run from. That night, they didn't sleep in separate rooms, but nothing rushed. No fire for fire's sake. No rushing toward something just because they could. They lay in bed together, fully clothed, under the old quilt Maya's grandmother had given her, and faced each other in the dark, their fingers intertwined, legs brushing, eyes open, talking, really talking, about things that never made it to wedding vows. Leo told her about his first rejection at a publishing house. Maya told him about the day she realized she'd been performing love with Grayson instead of living it. They laughed. They cried. They stayed awake until the sky began to pale. And somewhere between a whisper and a yawn, Maya said, Can I tell you something I was afraid to admit? Leo turned to her, brushing a thumb gently across her knuckles. Anything. She smiled into the dark. I think I was always meant to walk down that aisle. I just had the wrong name in mind. Leo didn't respond with words. He just pulled her closer, and kissed her like it wasn't the first time, but the one that made all the others finally make sense. The Ashford estate had never been louder. It started with a knock, not the kind you ignore, but the kind that shakes the front door in its frame. Leo opened it slowly, and there was Grayson, rain soaking through his coat, hair disheveled, eyes wild with something that looked a lot like desperation dressed up as pride. "We need to talk," he said. Leo didn't move. Grayson's gaze flicked over his shoulder, toward the warm glow spilling from the hall, toward the faint sound of Maya's voice, in the other room. "You let it happen," Grayson growled. "You didn't just marry her. You fell for her." Leo's face didn't change. "She wasn't yours to begin with." Grayson stepped forward. "She said yes to me, Leo. You were supposed to be the afterthought. The patch." Leo's jaw tightened. His voice dropped low. "And you were supposed to stay. But you ran." Maya heard them before she saw them. She came around the corner just in time to hear Grayson snap. "She was never going to love you." Leo didn't flinch, but Maya did. She stepped into the hall, raincoat half-buttoned, expression unreadable. Grayson saw her, and something in him cracked. "I get it now," he said. "You were always there, waiting, watching, like a vulture." Leo moved slightly, not aggressively, but protectively. "She's not something to be claimed, Grayson. She was mine." "No." Maya cut in sharply, stepping between them. "She was yours until you chose to disappear. And then, I waited. I broke waiting." Grayson stared at her, breathing hard. "I had doubts. I panicked. That's human." Leo's voice came softly behind her. "So is staying when you're scared." Maya turned to face Leo, and without breaking eye contact with him, she said, "I choose you." The silence that followed was heavier than anything Grayson could throw, because that wasn't an act of revenge. It wasn't a power play. It was truth. Grayson's chest rose and fell like he'd taken a punch he hadn't expected to land. "I was wrong," he said quietly, looking more like a shadow than a man. "You were," Leo answered. "But that's not what hurt her. It's that you didn't even try to make it right." Grayson looked at Maya one last time, and in that gaze was something almost tragic. He nodded once, turned, and walked away. No theatrics, no pleading, just footsteps and the sound of a chapter closing. That night, Leo stood in the garden, rain pattering softly around him, dripping from the rose vines they'd planted together. Maya came outside, barefoot, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. He didn't speak, didn't need to. She laid her head against his back. "Thank you for not fighting him." "I wasn't fighting him," Leo said quietly. "I was holding the line." She smiled against him. "And what line is that?" "The one between who we were supposed to be and who we finally became." The attic was warm with late summer dust and the soft creak of old wood. Maya hadn't meant to go up there. She was looking for a box of winter coats. Instead, she found a wooden chest tucked beneath an old canvas tarp, sealed with a leather strap. It was labeled in Leo's handwriting. Just one word. Unsent. Curiosity tugged at her fingers. She opened it gently, expecting maybe old journals or forgotten manuscripts. But what she found stole the breath from her lungs. Letters. Dozens of them. Folded neatly. Dated. Each one addressed in the same quiet script. To Maya. The first one was dated 3 days after their wedding. "You didn't look at me that night. And I didn't blame you. I just wanted you to know I didn't say I do out of obligation. I said it because I couldn't stand to watch you leave alone." Another. 2 months later. "You laugh when you read. You cover your mouth like you're afraid the world will hear you feeling joy again. I wish you wouldn't. I wish you'd let the sound live out loud." A year into their silent, strange marriage. "Today you painted in the garden again. I've never seen you more alive. I wanted to tell you you were beautiful, but I didn't want the words to scare you. So I said nothing, but you were." Maya sank to the attic floor, heart pounding, hands trembling as she opened letter after letter. They weren't dramatic. They weren't poetic. But they were true. They chronicled every quiet act of love he had given her. Moments she hadn't noticed. Touches he hadn't dared to offer. Words he had kept for fear they'd push her away. He had loved her long before the garden bloomed. Long before the kiss. Long before she knew what his steadiness meant. By the time she finished the last letter, her face was wet. She sat there, surrounded by paper and the scent of old cedar, letting herself cry the kind of tears that weren't about pain anymore, but about the breathtaking ache of being seen. Really seen. Even when she didn't know how to look back. That evening she found Leo on the back porch, watching the sun dip low behind the garden they had built with their own hands. She didn't say anything at first. She just slid the box of letters into his lap. He froze. Didn't look up. "I wasn't going to show you those," he murmured. "I know. I didn't want to make you feel guilty." Maya sat beside him, knees brushing. You didn't, she said. You made me feel safe, loved, even when I didn't love myself. Leo looked at her then, and she saw it, the panic, the fear that maybe she wasn't ready for all he had carried. But she was. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Write me another one, she whispered. He smiled softly. Now? No, she said, eyes shining. Tomorrow. And the next day, and every day after. Leo nodded. I will. Then he turned and kissed her forehead. And that was all she needed. Because sometimes the truest vows are the ones never spoken in front of a crowd, but folded in secret, and kept like sacred things. There were no guests, no flowers ordered, no music rehearsed, no aisle, only two people standing in the middle of the garden they had built together. Shoes off, hands bare, hearts wide open. The sun had just begun to rise, washing the sky in the soft blush of morning. The world was still quiet, and that was exactly how they wanted it. Maya wore a simple white linen dress, no veil, no jewelry. Her hair was loose, soft waves falling down her back like she'd just woken up from the kind of dream you don't want to leave. Leo wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, suspenders hanging carelessly at his sides like he didn't want anything too tight between him and the moment. They stood across from each other, hands clasped, surrounded by the lavender and jasmine that had bloomed in spite of everything. There was no officiant, no priest, no paper, just Leo, clearing his throat and looking at her like he couldn't believe she was real. And Maya, smiling through the tears that already blurred her vision. Leo spoke first, quietly, steadily. You once told me I never asked you for anything, he said. That's because I didn't want to hold you. I just wanted to be near you. But now, I want more. I want to wake up next to you without wondering if it's temporary. I want to build things with you, ruin things with you, grow old and forget names with you. He took a breath, voice trembling slightly. I promise to never raise my voice unless it's to cheer for you. I promise to write to you when words are too hard to say out loud. And I promise that no matter what happens, I will always be someone who stays. Maya laughed softly, tears falling without shame. Then she squeezed his hands and spoke. I didn't think I'd ever love again, she whispered. I thought love had to be loud, had to steal you. But you showed me that real love is the one that waits, the one that never demands to be seen, but always sees. She stepped closer, so their foreheads touched. I vow to love you in the silences, in the still mornings and the heavy nights, in the laughter and the aching. I promise I'll keep choosing you, even on the hard days, especially then. Leo closed his eyes, and a single tear slipped down his cheek. Maya brushed it away, and without another word, they kissed. There was no applause, no camera, no audience, only the wind moving gently through the garden, and the world quietly witnessing two people finally finding the home they had been searching for all along. Later they lay together on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the clouds roll by like slow ships. Leo whispered against her hair. This wasn't the story we were supposed to have. Maya smiled. I'm glad, she whispered back. The one we wrote instead is the only one I want. And that was the end of what was planned, but the beginning of everything that mattered.